Movie gimmicks. That little thing that some directors want to put into their movie in order to make it feel like you are experiencing the events of the movie right there in the theater. Perhaps the most famous person to use movie gimmicks is William Castle. He had a large series of horror movies and suspense movies where he would put in little gimmicks in order to get the audience more enthralled into the movie. Whether this was a skeleton that would fly across the theater in House on Haunted Hill, whether this was special glasses to see the ghosts in 13 Ghosts, whether this was other weird gimmicks like nurses around in case you got too scared by Homicidal. He really put a lot of effort into giving the most immersive experience he could to movie viewers. And while he was never considered a great artist, I think there's a lot that can be said about the importance of William Castle as a director and a showman. Moving out of the 50s and 60s, we then have the next great step in movie immersion, the Blair Witch Project. For those who weren't alive at the time or who were too young, the Blair Witch Project had a very interesting marketing campaign. They put together a whole website that featured facts about the woods that the kids had gone into. It had information about the legend of the witch, and information about the kids themselves. In addition to that, a fake documentary was made, trying to make it sound like all these events actually happened. And even the movie itself tries to present it as if this is the actual found footage of 3 kids who were killed by the mysterious Blair Witch. While I'm not a big fan of the gimmick, and the weak acting of the movie took me out of it, there is enough there that I understand why people like the Blair Witch, and for those who grew up with that movie, especially the marketing campaign, really get an extra kick out of that film. This led to an era of more immersive found footage movies, with probably the king of all these movies being the Paranormal Activity series. While now the Paranormal Activity movies seem like a joke, back in the day, they really had people going. There's a reason why there's so many sequels. People could feel immersed like they were in the house by looking at all the different camera footage. And while that doesn't work for people like me, I can understand it on a psychological level that there would be those who could get enthralled by the events of the movie by keeping their eyes on the cameras and feeling like they're part of the family in that house. This brings us to today's movie, Incantation. Incantation is also designed in the way to make the audience feel like the events are real. That the symbol, the chant, the cult, everything is real, and now you yourself have gotten cursed by watching this movie. This led to people doing research. As it turns out, the symbol, made up. The chant, made up. The cult? Well, it's technically a religious sect that follows Mother Buddha, so I don't know if calling them a cult is really fair, and they don't seem to be nearly as evil as they are presented in this movie. However, it did scare people enough that this movie got a lot of hype behind it. But I'm here to tell you that any of that stuff is just a gimmick. It's there to scare you, to make you feel like you're part of the movie, like you are sharing the curse alongside the family in this film. To add to that, they said that this movie was based on a true story, and the true story and this movie have so little to do with each other, you may as well say Pocahontas is an accurate retelling of the colonization of America. So, with that in mind, let's check out today's film. And remember, it's only a movie. Hello everyone, welcome to my den. It's time to talk about another horror movie. This time we're looking at 2022's Incantation, a Taiwanese horror film that had a lot of hype surrounding it before I gave it a watch. And usually when a movie has a lot of that hype, I have high expectations. I expect something to be very creepy, very disturbing, have great effects, great acting, etc., etc. Then I turned the movie on and discovered it's found footage. Great. This is not my genre, people. I do not like found footage movies. I personally find it to be a crutch because it allows you to kind of skip out on certain aspects of storytelling, and the first-person perspective thing works for some people, and for me it just makes me nauseous. I really hate shaky cam. So when all that came together, I started to temper my expectations. I went from, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be super scary, to, oh gosh, it's a found footage movie. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means it had a long road to climb in order to earn points in my book. So let's get on to the story. Incantation is a family drama mixed with supernatural elements. We follow Lee Ronan as she tries to get custody of her daughter. Apparently, she'd given her daughter up after a number of tragedies had occurred to her, and she was declared unfit to be a mother. She now has a new apartment, she's putting things together and trying really hard to be the mother that her daughter needs. Interspliced with this is chunks of information, such as Lee informing us of an incantation and a symbol that we should memorize, without really giving us a good explanation as to why. In addition to that, we cut to footage of when she was younger and pregnant with her daughter, and going with her boyfriend and his buddy to do a YouTube video about debunking myths and ghost stories. They go to a rural town and try to be part of their ritual without fully understanding what is going on in this town and what the ritual means. The storytelling is done in a non-linear format, so we're jumping around between different time periods, between about 6 years previous, the current time, kind of pushing forward a little bit through the current time as Lee gets her daughter, and her daughter starts seeing a ghost, or a baddie, as it is called, all the weird stuff that starts happening in the household, in addition to occasionally cutting to other people giving explanations about certain aspects of this cult and the village and all the weirdness that goes along with that. Needless to say, things get worse and worse for Lee and her daughter, as it seems like there's a bit of a curse put upon the family. Not only that, but Lee starts to kind of mentally break down a bit, trying to live a normal life and having bad things happen over and over again. As the story progresses, we get towards the end of everything, wherein we have now learned what the group of friends did to the temple, and we eventually see Lee's daughter in the hospital with a strange disease caused by the curse and not properly protecting her daughter. In the end, we follow Lee going back to the cursed town, back into this temple, to try to resolve everything, with a fourth wall breaking ending where she explains what the chant means, explains what the symbol means, and tries to essentially share her curse with the audience in order to save her daughter. The ending is very dark and could be seen as disturbing by some people. It is designed to kind of psychologically mess with you, and if you're very superstitious, this movie could bother you in a lot of ways. The nonlinear style of the story is actually pretty good because it builds up mysteries, explains a little bit here and there, while watching the family drama play out. I generally kind of liked how it all came together, but part of that is due to the characters. One of the biggest problems of found footage movies is that characters never feel real. Some found footage movies do have scripts, just like this one, because it allows the story to work better, and people, who might not have the best improvising talents aren't struggling to find words. But at the same time, oftentimes the things that will be said on scripts don't necessarily feel real, per se. One of the advantages with the way the characters are handled is that they feel more real, especially the facial reactions and physical reactions to what they are seeing in the course of the events. The majority of the story is told and focuses on Lee Ronan as she is dealing with all these different problems from the past, the present, and a little glimpse into that final little arc, I guess what you could call the future, after her daughter gets sick. Her emotional reactions to things, the way she looks, her facial expressions all work really, really well. And since I don't speak the native language of the actors, I can't really judge her acting, but at least on the physical side, there's something there that makes it feel more real. And I think that really works alongside the found footage style to really give the audience that trick in their mind of thinking, oh my gosh, this is all like a real thing, even though, they're actors. I also want to give points to the daughter. While little kid acting is always kind of eh, and her dub voice is almost comical, I would go and say that her reactions, the physicality of the actress, the way she reacts with the baddie, which apparently was the director in a green screen suit, so that the way she reaches out, the way she is guided or being spoken to, seems more real, is because there was someone there that they cut out. And I do appreciate that. When she's getting sick, when she's crying, when she, is in danger or she's scared or she's upset about school, all of her reactions feel very natural and look very real. And I think it adds a lot to the sympathy factor as bad things are happening to this child who really had no part in any of the things the idiots in the past actually did. Speaking of which, the friends in the past are basically douchebag characters from a slasher film. Their whole purpose is to just piss off the evil thing and then get killed, which is more or less what happens to them. Unfortunately, getting the curse to also spill over to Ronan and her daughter, which is rather unfortunate, though Ronan was part of their group and pushed forward and saw things she wasn't supposed to see. In other words, like she says in the beginning, she broke a major taboo, and now she is cursed because of it. These guys don't even need names. They can literally be known as Dummy Number 1 and Dummy Number 2, because all the decisions they make, all the disrespect they show to the cult, is obviously going to lead to their deaths, and frankly, they're barely characters. It is important to note that they're trying to capture that whole 20-something, I don't really care, I'm invincible kind of mentality, and that disrespect the youth tends to have, especially in the modern day, for religious practices. Then we have our side characters. This includes the foster father, the traditional priests, the psychologist, all of whom add little parts to the story, and sadly, all of whom get affected by the curse as well. So this does give us a larger body count, if that's what you're looking for in your creepy ghost story type horror movie. All of them do a good enough job. You definitely get that sense that once bad things start happening to people, you do have that sympathy for them because you realize they really only got hurt because they learned about the curse in the first place. So it's that spreading effect, and it affected those who really didn't deserve their fates. It works pretty well because while the buddies in the past are idiots, everyone else here is trying to help Lee and her daughter and having terrible things happen to them. One thing I'm definitely going to say about the aesthetics, they are dark and moody, which really works. There's definitely like a gross feeling to certain locations, especially the isolated village, temple of the cults. And when things start to get worse and worse for Ronan, her apartment also seems to degrade alongside her. I think making those kind of environments really helps add a lot to this movie. And there are a lot of moments where the camera isn't showing you certain things, and that of course can also play with your mind as well. What hurts the movie is the audio, because it has what I like to call movie audio. And some found footage movies really suffer from this, and it takes you out of it. If we're supposed to be watching this on someone's video camera or phone or whatever, then that's fine. But why is there a proper movie soundtrack in the background? Why do we have that build up before they look at something creepy or scary, when in reality you wouldn't have that if you were just recording it, unless we're supposed to assume that when editing the footage, Lee put in spooky music in order to enhance the scene. Things like that don't work. It's not every sequence in the movie, but there are certain sequences that do that, and it kind of takes me out of the this is found footage, because why does it have a soundtrack? Now, when it's the normal ambient sounds, it does a good job with that. The weird sound of creaking and crashing of things, that really works. The slamming of the fists on the side of the car, the screams, the weird sounds inside the cave, things like that work really, really well. So it's a mixed bag when it comes to the audio, because I like those ambient kind of things. It very much builds up the spooky atmosphere, but as soon as the scary music starts playing, I'm like, oh god, now we're gonna get a jump scare, now we're gonna see something gross. All right, cool. Finally, there's little things that add to the movie. There's very much a motif of bugs, and a lot of creepy bugs all over the place. I very much like how the bugs were utilized. It is very gross and gives you that sense of like these bugs are bringing the evil with them. And it's definitely a motif that is used throughout the movie. I do appreciate that. It works really, really well, especially if you have a aversion to bugs. I'm not really a bug aversion person, but I like their usage in certain horror movies, and when they're overused, it can actually start to bother me as well. In addition to that, there is some decent makeup work done to see like the rotting on the daughter from the curse, to see the mother and the weird symbols and stuff all over her face. For the most part, the makeup is pretty good. I think the gore effect makeup is really, really good. The makeup on Lee at the end looks a little silly, and as pointed out by one of my friends while watching, how did she do that? And yeah, that's also another problem. If this is supposed to be all found footage, how could she have made the markings all over her body like that? She wouldn't have been able to really do that on her own. So much like the sound, the makeup really is a mixed bag. While the blood and bodies and stuff like that look really good, especially a lot of the background stuff looks really good, what we have at a few points looks a little silly too. Overall, the aesthetics aren't terrible. The moody atmosphere really, really helps. But the audio and some of the makeup does degrade it a little bit and break that sense of immersion that they're trying to achieve with a found footage movie. Overall, Incantation is very overhyped. Unless you're going to buy into the premise of the movie that this whole curse and everything is real, then you're not really going to have it affect you that much. The mixed aesthetics doesn't help either, but it does have a good story and decent acting from our various people in the story. Now, what a lot of people talk about when they talk about Incantation is that it's based on a true story. Yeah, the true story has almost nothing to do with this movie. The true story concerns a family that everyone believed they were cursed. They started eating their own urine and feces, attacking each other, and eventually one of the daughters, who was in her 20s, got a mysterious illness and died. And not a lot of that connects directly into this movie, like with other movies that try to do that whole, oh, now you're cursed, viewer. I mean, obviously, this movie's been viewed all over the world. It's on Netflix. If people were cursed, we'd have people dying left and right. It is fiction, and that based on a true story thing is really stretching the truth right there. When seeing a family kind of succumb to mental illness or possibly a curse or what have you would have been an interesting story. We got a mother-daughter story that tries to mess with the audience. And it'll work on some people. A lot of people are freaked out about it, but more of the scariness is pre-watching it than actually watching it. The psyching yourself out because people tell you how scary it is and how like it's based on real stuff will totally mess with certain people ahead of time. When if you just watched this as a movie and didn't know any of that, you would probably just go, it's okay. So the overhyped nature of this movie really does hurt what is an above average found footage movie. On the good side, we have great visuals, an interesting story, and good acting. On the negative, we have a kind of an easily predictable ending. Some of the character deaths are totally telegraphed, and some of the weird makeup effects and shooting choices can take you out of the movie. It's pretty decent. It's an above average found footage movie. It's not going to be for everyone. If you're a very superstitious person, if you don't like movies that fourth wall break and try to pull you into the story, forcefully in some ways, then don't watch this. It's just going to bother you and make you freak out and do a whole massive online search about whether or not other people have died after watching this movie. If you're looking for a creepy, disturbing found footage movie, there's definitely worse choices than Incantation. The bottom line, highly recommended. It's not perfect, but it has enough going for it that makes it an enjoyable film. And if you're in the mood for something like this, you'll definitely get a kick out of it. I'd highly recommend watching it with friends because I think the worst choice is watching it alone. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's a good foreign horror movie you think I should review. Because honestly, this was a fun experience and it really gave me a different type of horror movie that I wasn't expecting. And until then, I'm the Dapper Bard, and I'll see you at the tavern.